All right, so here's an update. That's the Q1 that I've been building. Last video I discussed about the worm gear with it binding up, I thought. So I put the worm gear in it, made a little bit of a difference. It was much quieter. Then I decided to change the worm gear cover, and that made a big difference. I took the worm gear out that I had in there and put it in the front truck, and the front truck started dragging. So to verify that it was actually the worm gear, I am assuming that the worm gear cover was compromised from the chemical reaction between the baking soda and the crazy glue. I think it might have got too warm, maybe warped, or maybe it was just dried out and warped on its own. I don't know, but it made a big difference. What I did notice was the cover on the worm gear, I had the screw furthest away from the motor. Was it furthest away from the motor? Yeah, the screw furthest away from the motor, I had to put a little sleeve underneath about the thickness of a thin piece of cardboard, like the thickness of, say the paper, the cardboard that crazy glue comes in. Shim it underneath. When I tighten it all the way down, it would cause it to drag just a little bit. So I tweaked that. I know that happens from age, plastic distorting and whatnot. So I've had to do that before. So I shimmed it. That made a difference. And I still, because it's dual motors and they're not linked in with any sort of linkage, you're prone to having one slightly quicker, every 10 revolutions. I counted it out at a slow speed. Every 10 revolutions for the rear truck and the front truck, in the time that it takes for 10 revolutions, the front truck gains almost a full revolution at a low speed. Shouldn't be a problem. It was worse. I put the same exact motor in. The motors, you buy these $5 Chinese motors off the interweb. They're not all exactly, we'll just, for argument's sake, say 12,000 RPM. They're not all exactly that. They should be, but they're not. So I put one motor in it that was actually slower. Same brand motor. Put another one in it, and it was a lot better. So I left that. I also changed the angle of the motor to take some of the bend off the rubber drive shaft, because just that alone will cause it to bog. So I already ran one lap before I started filming just to make sure it would run. It does run, and it actually drains a lot less current. At this speed, last night, this thing would be draining 3/4 of an amp. It's just under a half an amp. Now, remember, each motor is going to drain 1/4 of an amp. So if you have two motors, you should be around a half an amp. I have a headlight in there. I put a LED in there. The reason why I did that is so I can monitor if it flickers on and off. It tells me if the contacts are losing power on the track. So I'm half an amp right now at 10 volts. It's also a lot quicker than it was. And the slow speed is a hell of a lot better. I mean, it's a homemade chassis, so I don't expect it to be absolutely perfect. I mean, I wish it ran as smooth as the T1 and the S1, but I don't know. You comment. If you watch this video, comment and tell me, A lot of people watch this stuff, like Paps. He's been doing this a lot longer than me. Is that a good slow speed for a Rivarossi homemade Mickey Mouse chassis? Is that acceptable? I mean, I don't know. It looks pretty good to me. It's got a little bit of hobble. The traction tires could just be dried out. It runs on 18s. Where are you? Here you are. It still needs to be wet sanded and painted and like basically spot putty. I use a heavy duty primer that you brush on and then wet sand it, and that fills the little crevices. So I'm at just under a quarter, just under a half an amp. I would say that's good. Because like I said, we have two motors. I do have a ton of weight in this thing. I'm probably going to remove some of it. I don't need that much weight. I mean, the thing just almost came off the track at that corner. Now where that switch was, right there, that switch is 18 radius, that turnout. That's, I believe, the only 18 on the main layout. The rest of them are, where are we? The rest of the 18s are in here. Those are 18s. The other ones here are 22s and I think 118. 22s and 33s. You can see there's a 22, a 22, a 33. So I won't be driving the train in there anyway, but I have a thing. If a train can't run on 18 radius, I don't want it. And when you chop the flanges, I could have just had the front drivers and the rear drivers touch the track and took the flanges off. But then when it goes through a turn, the wheels are suspended over the track. It looks horrible. I'd rather make an articulated frame. It's not as, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It's just not as, I don't know. I can't think of the word, but I'm sure you know what I mean. It's to me, articulation is the only way to go. Plus, it's a challenge making it work. I would say that's pretty good, considering last night I messed around with this thing until well after 2 in the morning. I had to get up at 6 to go to work. I was very disappointed with the way it ran, but I did know that I would prevail. I had to do an awful lot of work to get the T1 to run correctly. It took like 3 or 4 days to iron out the kinks. This has only been a running locomotive for 2.5 days, so I think on 2.5 days in, we're all right. And where are we here? Just under half an amp. The 2 motors. Those are 3-pole skew wound motors. I get them off of eBay. They're 12,000 RPM, which a lot of people would say, well, that's a lot of RPM for a model train. But, yeah, it is. But if you decide to put DCC in something, you're going to lose some of that speed. Because think of it this way. You're running on, I'm using Power Command Tech 3, right? That's 18 volts at full crank, supposedly. I metered it with an 8, it's just over 16, maybe 17. DCC, no matter what you do, the motor is going to see 14 volts, roughly. That's it. That's all it's ever going to see. And then, of course, it's pulse powered. And these motors, you can run them with the DCC if you have a good decoder and you want to play with the CVs. If you have a cheap decoder and does not allow you to mess with the back reading of the motor will run hot. Everybody tells me a decoder shouldn't make the motor run hot. It will run hot. I've even had cheap 5-pole motors run hot with cheap decoders. Take that decoder out, put a Tsunami in there and adjust the CVs. No heat at all. That's actually how I ended up with some of these motors kicking around that I ended up using for this train. I put them in motors that had trains that had cheap decoders. They ran hot. Not the decoder, the motor. And I thought it was the motor. I took the motor out, put another motor in, 5-pole motor, like this. I think this is a Mahano motor. Well, not a Mahano, but I believe these are what they use in Mahanos. Some of them. Still ran hot. That's a 5-pole skew motor. And it would have a hum at low speeds. Pulled that cheap decoder out. Put a better decoder in. No hum, no heat. So I'm going to leave these DC anyway. I'm not messing around with any of my homemade trains. I'm not playing around with putting DCC in it. It's not worth the aggravation. It would sound nice chugging along though, wouldn't it? Especially the S1. Who knows? I say I'm not going to do a lot of things and I do them. Sorry about my horrible camera work. So that's my tender for my T1. I have to get some trucks to put wheels in that can have power pickups to build another tender. So I won't be building probably another tender until I get some more money. Because this project, I paid like $45, which eBay is a ripoff, but what are you going to do? $45 for each chassis. One of them didn't even have a frame. The frame wasn't on it with the parts to build this train. And then the rest of the stuff is, you know, a piece of pipe and lots of crazy glue and baking soda. And so it's a hell of a lot more fun building one than it is to buy one. And this will run on sharp turns. And once I put some traction tires in it, this thing will pull 50 cars, no problem. Maybe more. My S1 will pull about 60 cars, pull 50 cars, no problem, up the hill. So, I don't know. Not too bad. I still gotta actually take it apart and oil it and grease it. It's got very little grease on the gears, so I'm not gonna run it too long, but sounds alright to me. No more grinding noise. So anyway, pass a comment. Let me know what you think as far as the slow speed goes. I'm interested. I've only been back in the hobby for about a year and a half, 2 years now, so I don't know. I mean, I know that my big boy with a Tsunami DCC, all 6 of them, except 4 of them have Tsunami Dakotas in them, and they creep. I mean, they really creep. But those aren't homemade chassis, so. I also don't have 2 motors fighting one another either, so. Anyway, I think it works pretty good. Anyway, thanks for watching.